Hey everybody, it's Brad with another Floriani Total Control U video for you today. Today we're going to talk about resizing existing embroidery designs, by which I mean a design that's already a stitch file, a PES design or a JEF design or whatever format your machine uses design. A design that's not one that we made in the software. A design that we don't have the working or WAF file for. And the short version of this video is as follows. Don't do that. That's it. Okay, so seriously, you can do it, but it doesn't always work. Not every design can be resized, even a little bit. That's not to say that you can't resize designs ever. You can, and there's a few different ways to do it. So let's go through, but just keep in mind what I said at the beginning. If you have any way to get the design at a different size, whether you have purchased need a good design set or something like that where it's got multiple sizes, use the other sizes, don't just resize the design that you have. Or if it's a design that you're digitizing yourself, don't take that design that you digitized yourself and then resize it. Redigitize it at the size that you want it. It is always better to use a design that was digitized to be the size that you're going to sew it out. But anyway, so we're going to open an existing stitch file here. We're going to open a design. I've just got some random Dakota designs in here. And let's see. We'll grab this one first. And say what I want to do with this is I would want to make it 20% smaller. Okay, so we're going to open it up. And if we just open up the design and do nothing, select the whole thing by hitting all items and go to my transform tab up here under properties and decrease the size to 80%, which is going to make it 20% smaller. Hit apply. There we go. That's done it. So for all intents and purposes, I just resized this design. So what is the problem with the way that I just did that? Well, let's go back one step. I'm going to hit undo up here. Now take a look at my stitch count. 3,323 stitches. We're going to redo so that it does the sizing, and that stitch count does not change. So the stitch count is still 3,323, and what that means is it's just pushed the stitches closer together, essentially. I've increased the density of this design. Now, is that going to matter? Maybe. Maybe not. With this particular design, it probably would still work. But that is the simplest way to size it, is just to size it. That has no chance of breaking the way the digitizing looks in it. It has no chance of changing the way that our shapes look and everything like that, but it does make the design denser, and most of the time that is going to cause a problem in and of itself, whether it be the thread breaking when you try to sew it out or just the design feeling bulletproof. It's not an ideal way to size your design. So the second way for us to resize an existing stitch file would be to have the software compensate for the difference in the size by removing some of the stitches automatically while leaving it as a stitch file. And the way you would accomplish that is we would go into the preferences, program preferences here, go under digitizing, and put a check mark next to adjust resized manual paths and say OK. Now we're going to do the same thing that we did before. We're going to go up to the transform tab and we're going to change this 80%. Keep an eye down here on stitches 3323 and hit apply. And now it's 2886. It has taken some of the stitches away. And on this particular design, it doesn't seem like it broke anything. Everything still looks the same. Everything looks fine. I don't have any random stitches poking out anywhere that weren't there before. You know, it looks okay. Although, if we look close, we can see this gap in the stitching right here. Was that there before? I don't know. Let's hit undo. Take a look at that section. It was not there. So that process introduced a difference to my design. It changed something about it, something about the way that it formed that stitch. In taking away stitches from my satin stitch there, it did damage the design. Now, would you notice that at that size? Probably not, but you might. And there's no way to know unless you sew it out whether you're going to notice that difference. So how else could we do this? Well, let's go ahead and undo all the way back to the beginning. So there has been nothing done to this design yet. Oop, I meant to choose to fit here. So now nothing has been done to this design now. The other thing, the other way that we could do this would be to convert this into an outline file, by which I mean we have the power in this program to convert this design to a semblance of what it would be if we digitized it ourselves. Each piece would then be a separate segment, as right now if I click on my yellow here, for instance, the yellow is entirely highlighted, and if you have blue highlights turned on yours will be turning blue if you were to click on an element in your design. By default, that is going to look like this. Okay, I turn that off when I'm digitizing. I'll leave it on for when I'm doing this video here, though. So now this is all one section. If I open up in my sequence view, I can see that this is all one thing. It's just, it's this one actually, is all one thing. It's not broken up into pieces. We can, however, break it all up into individual shapes by selecting the whole design and then right-clicking and choosing Convert to Outlines. But wait, before I do that, I actually need, if I'm not going to be sizing with the stitch mode, I'm going to go into digitizing and turn this off, adjust manual resize paths. You want to do one or the other, not both. So I'm going to say OK, select the whole thing, and we're going to right click on it and choose Convert to Outlines. Now here is the rub with doing it this way. Yes, it will scale better, but take a look down here, 3323. That's how many stitches are in this design right now. Watch what happens when I click Convert to Outlines. My stitch count is 0 now, just because nothing's selected. My stitch count is now 3721. I have several hundred more stitches in this design than I had before. So where are those stitches? I don't know. Do those stitches make a difference in the way this design sews out? I don't know. Maybe. And if they do, then I'd have to figure out where it is that the difference is. If it's something that breaks it, I mean, it's something that makes it not work right. Let's take a look here. Let's look a little closer at this part. I see a spot where it may have busted it. See here where this stitch is kind of missing? Let's go ahead and hit undo and see whether that was like that before. It was not. So simply by converting it to outlines, I have broken part of the design. Again, are you going to be able to tell the difference? Maybe. You don't know until you sew it out. Doing this also makes it more challenging to select any given part, because now, look at this, I've left-clicked in here, and it's actually selected part of the underlay, or possibly that's a traveling stitch. Whatever it is, that's not what I meant to click. I wanted to click on my top stitch. So there we go. That time I got it. Now it's a segment. Now it's a piece that we can actually go in and do stuff with. If we look at our properties menu, we've got all of our properties available. We could go in here and look at our shape tool and see whether we could maybe fix this by adjusting the stitch directions somewhere in here. Maybe we could move our start and stop points slightly. But we could go in here, let's say we add another inclination right there to see whether we maybe can't fix this, and maybe we'll make that taper a little bit at the end. Let's see what happens when we right click. Okay, so I fixed my problem that was introduced from converting it to outlines, my first problem that I had found. Now let's see what happens if we go in and we scale this. We take this, we go all the way over to my transform tab, decrease the size by 20%. We set that to value to 80. That's going to decrease our size by 20% and say OK. What do we get? Well, it sized it down and it broke something else. Now, we do have the tools to fix that. We could go in here, we can adjust our stitch directions and say, all right, let's take a closer look here. Maybe we'll move this guy here a little bit. We'll move this guy down a little bit and see whether that takes care of it. Right click to generate. No, it's still not perfect. We could also change our density a little bit. So if we change this value, that's going to force it. So we can see that it's still not doing it though. There we go. That's pretty much got it. So basically I did that just by adjusting my density a little bit. Of course, now the density of this doesn't quite match all the surroundings. We could manually go in and adjust the density of each one of those. But, you know, to sit here and spend the time to make it exactly dead perfect, I may as well just digitize this design. It's not a complicated design. But anyway, no matter what we do, something's gonna not be exactly perfect, and it's up to you whether that matters to you. When you sew it out and it looks the same to your eye, then it's fine. It doesn't make any difference. But sometimes it makes a big difference when we convert something to outlines or we size it using the other tools. So let's see. We're going to delete that, and we'll close that all together. Actually, we'll just go in and open a new design. Let's see, there's one in particular that looks like it should be super easy, but there's a couple of complications when you do it. Here we go. Okay, so this one. Bring this design up. Now this looks like it should scale really well, because it's mostly just fill stitches and satin border stitches. That's all this is, one run stitch in there. But let's see what happens if we do resize this with the manual path method. So everything here is in stitches right now. This is just a stitch file. We can go to our preferences, go to digitizing, adjust resized manual paths, put a check there, and then we'll select the whole design and decrease its size by 20%. Oop, see what I just did there? That's a mistake. I want to decrease the size to 80%, thus decreasing it by 20%. So if that is a easy mistake to make. We're going to go ahead and hit apply. It's 20% smaller now. And let's take a look at what we've got here. Well, all the fills look okay. It did introduce some weird little jagginess and jump stitches. Maybe that's underlay breaking out underneath of the satin border stitches possibly, but the big problem is that our teeth are broken. Our teeth are completely broken here. So that's with just a 20% resize down, we've completely broken the teeth. And that's not good. So let's hit undo. We'll go in and turn off our adjust manual paths, and we're going to go and reselect everything. We're going to once again go and do a convert to outlines. Okay, we've converted it to outlines. Our teeth are still okay. But then we look down here, you see there's a gap that wasn't there before in this fill, and this fill back here is broken. It's all broken, and our stitch count, I didn't look at what the stitch count was before, but I'm sure it's different than what it was. Okay, so before it was, we'll just look at the top, 14,498, and then after we do it, it's 16,169. So that is a significant difference in stitch count that it's done. So not only has it broken these parts, it also broke right here on this part of the satin border. So without even resizing it, we've broken all these things. So what happened up here is it separated these fills into multiple sections. And down here, this is separated into multiple sections. If we go and look at the way that this is broken down, we don't have a consistent fill all throughout the red area here. Okay, we've got little pieces that are broken off, and that's why it's got this gap here. And same for the gray in the main up there. All of these are separate pieces. See, that's a separate piece from that. If you're digitizing that manually, that you know, if you did it yourself, it wouldn't be that way. So what else can we do? Well, let's undo to get back to the beginning so that nothing's been changed on it. We'll go into fit so we can see the whole thing. And what else could we do? Well, we have another option for converting to outlines, and that will solve some of our problems. If we right-click here and do a Convert to Outlines Advanced, we have the ability to remove underlay or merge fills. We're going to leave the underlay, but we're going to tell it to merge our fills. So we're going to left-click on that and hit OK. That should take care of some of this issue, and it has indeed fixed the fact that we had this gray area and this empty area that was broken. But there is now a new problem, and that problem is it has taken our underlay and stuck it on top of our fill. And if you didn't look close, you wouldn't be able to tell, but if we go in and select this run stitch here and this run stitch here, which is our underlay, is actually on top of our fill stitches, and that looks ridiculous. Or actually, no, the first one I selected wasn't. That's in the right place. But this is in the wrong place. It's overlapping our top stitch. Why? Well, it's because this is an algorithm. It's not a human doing this. So we can certainly fix that. We just go up here to run, move it up there, take this, move it up there, so that the underlay is underneath of our fill in the sequence view. There we go. Now our satin stitch here is still broken, but we're going to ignore that for a moment. Select all items, do our transform, decrease it by 20%, hit apply. Teeth are intact, fills are intact. Still got underlay on top on the gray part back here. I could go in and change that. But basically, now I've managed to size this design down. It's still not perfect because it broke the satin stitch, but we're going to just call that good enough. Nobody is going to notice that anyway. But all this trouble just to resize this design down 60%. So if you don't mind it being a little bit broken, you can resize the design all you want. And yeah, your machines, a lot of your machines have built-in resizing. You get the same problems though. You just don't notice them, probably, because it's not that noticeable. But if you care about your design being exactly the way that it was digitized, don't resize it. It just doesn't work. Also, the other moral of this video really is going to be in your open menu when you do file and open. There's an option to convert anything that you open to outlines. Don't ever do that, because if all you're doing is opening up the design and changing a color or deleting something out of an existing design, which you can do that all day long as stitches without converting it to outlines and ruining anything. You can do that without converting it to outlines, basically. So generally speaking, I recommend not converting existing stitch files to outlines unless it's for just like one specific part of the design. Sometimes it can be helpful. Like if you've got a design that's got parts of it that you want to keep, parts of it that you want to delete. I'll show you an example of what I mean. Here, let's open a new design here. The one with the 3 coffee cups. Okay, so let's say that I want to get rid of this coffee cup and I want to keep these 2 coffee cups. Maybe I want to get rid of this coffee cup and these beans, and I want to keep these coffee cups. Well, on this particular design, it's actually pretty easy to do that. Because they're not touching at all, I can use the stitch tool here, edit stitch, to draw a box around the parts I want to get rid of. It selects them and just hit the delete key on my keyboard and they're gone. So that is pretty easy, right? I mean, I can just do that and that part of the design is gone. So maybe this wasn't the best example of that. Let me try and find something. Well, there's multitudes of reasons why that might not always work, but what I could do is say I wanted to delete. So now I've got these 2 designs and I want to delete just this part of it and leave the rest of it intact. I want to get rid of this, but unfortunately it's the same color as this part and it's grouped together. I can't ungroup that, but I can convert it to outlines. Then I can select the one I want to get rid of and hit delete. Well, that's a little more complicated than I have to select all of the stuff in it and hit delete. But now I've got rid of that piece and left this piece, but this piece has now been converted to a different type of stitch altogether. Okay, so let's undo. So we see that my stitch looks different. It's actually not that different, so that's probably fine. But it did change the way this works. But everything else is left the same. So that kind of stuff you can do all day. When you resize it is when stuff really starts to break, though. So I implore you, use the designs at the size they were digitized. And if they don't sew out perfectly, don't blame the software. Don't blame the machine. It's not their fault. It's not magic. The process of converting an existing stitch file back into outlines and then back into stitches, it's like if you take It's like if you take a phrase and you type it into Google Translate, and then you take the results of that Google Translate and translate it back into English. You never get the original phrase back. It's the same thing. You can't expect it to be able to take something that doesn't have all the same information, that is, the original drawings that were done to create the artwork, and have it perfectly turn it into the artwork. It's just not going to happen. So just be aware of that when you're resizing designs. Don't get frustrated if you can't get a design to resize and look good. It's not your fault. It's not the software's fault. It's nobody's fault. It's just the way that it works. So that is my... I'm going to get off of my soapbox here. But that is my thoughts on the matter of resizing existing embroidery designs. So I hope you learned something in this video. I'll see you next time.